This is Indigo. At just 11 years old, she exists in the neon shadows of Seoul, a city that has forgotten she even breathes. Born to a mother who traveled across the world to teach only to lose her mind to the streets, Indigo has no home, no country, and no one to protect her from the predators of the night. She is invisible, forgotten, yet she possesses a mind sharper than a diamond. But one day, the impossible happened. She met Min-Hee, the daughter of a billionaire CEO who lives in a palace of glass and steel, yet is drowning under the weight of her father's expectations. It was Indigo, the barefoot girl from the back alleys, who became her secret mentor. But when Min-Hee's father, the cold-blooded leader of the Iron Lotus Syndicate, discovered a street urchin infiltrated his private rooftop garden, what he found in her bag didn't just leave him speechless, it threatened to bring his entire empire to its knees. Grab your popcorn, dim the lights, and prepare for a story of blood debts and brilliant minds. And if you're ready for more tailies from the shadows, hit that subscribe button and join our syndicate. Foreign trash move. The sharp crack of a designer heel hitting the pavement landed just inches from Indigo's hand. She didn't flinch. She was a ghost in this city, and ghosts don't feel insults. The socialite's voice rang out again through the filtered air of the Gangnam district. Is this a sidewalk or a landfill? Get this beggar away from my store before I call security. Indigo tightened her grip on the tattered, oversized math textbook, the only thing her mother had left her. Beside her, tucked into the shadow of a luxury vending machine, her mother sat tracing invisible equations in the condensation of the glass. Her hair was matted, her eyes seeing a world of numbers and stars that no one else could perceive. People in tailored suits hurried past, their eyes sliding right over them as if they were nothing more than a glitch in the city's perfect software. Indigo was only 11, but the streets of Seoul had turned her heart into iron. She didn't cry when the shopkeepers called her a shadow child. What hurt more was the cold, clinical silence of the city, the way the bright lights of the skyscrapers never seemed to reach the alleyways where she slept. Her mother used to be brilliant. On rare, quiet nights, she would whisper complex theorems like lullabies, calling Indigo her little engineer. But those moments were like the city's fleeting summer gone before you could even feel the warmth. Most days her mother was lost, screaming at the digital billboards or trying to save the code she thought was trapped inside the streetlights. Indigo had no father, no passport, and no record. When she had asked who she belonged to, her mother had simply pointed at the shifting neon lights and whispered, "The data. We are just data in the wind." They lived in the crawl space of a 24-hour PC bang. When the gamers were loud, they stayed awake. When the servers ran hot, they finally felt warm. Their bed was a pile of discarded circuit boards and old bubble wrap. Their blanket was the hum of the city. Indigo had forgotten how to dream of a future. She only spoke the language of the next meal. But as she reached into her tattered bag to touch the edges of her mother's old notebook, she saw a black SUV with tinted windows pull up to the park across the street. She didn't know it yet, but the man inside was Director Han, the most dangerous man in Korea, and her life was about to collide with his in a way the Syndicate would never forget. The rain in Seoul didn't fall, it dissolved, turning the neon glow of the city into a blurred, watercolor nightmare. For Indigo, the rain was a clock. It meant the shelter of the subway vents would soon be too damp to sleep near, and the grey zones, the places where the police didn't bother looking, would become rivers of cold sludge. Indigo adjusted the strap of her tattered backpack, the weight of her mother's old math books pressing against her spine like a shield. She stood under the eaves of a closed convenience store, watching the reflection of a massive digital billboard in a puddle. The billboard displayed the face of Director Han, his expression cold and unreadable, announcing the launch of a new global security interface. To the world, he was the architect of the future. To Indigo, he was just another god in a city that didn't take prayer. "The variables are shifting, Indigo," her mother whispered. Indigo turned. Her mother was crouching by a trash bin, her fingers moving frantically in the air as if solving an invisible equation. Her mother's eyes, once bright with the fire of a university professor, were now wide and hollow, reflecting the flashing red and blue lights of a distant ambulance. "The code is breaking. We have to stabilize the sequence before the lights go out." "I know, Mommy," Indigo said softly, stepping into the rain to guide her mother toward the back of a 24-hour PC bang. "We just need to get inside. It's warm there." Inside the PC bang, the air was thick with the scent of instant noodles and the hum of 100 cooling fans. They slipped into the shadow corner, a narrow space behind the server racks where the manager, a man who had long ago lost his own soul to gaming, pretended not to see them as long as Indigo kept the floors swept. Indigo sat on a pile of flattened cardboard and pulled out a damp, crumpled flyer she had found near the Iron Lotus Syndicate's corporate headquarters. On the back, she began to write. She wasn't writing a diary or a plea for help. She was calculating the probability of their survival for the next 7 days based on the rising price of bread and the drop in temperature. As her mother drifted into a fitful sleep, mumbling about the beauty of prime numbers, Indigo looked out the small, grimy window at the penthouse towers that touched the clouds. She didn't want their gold. She didn't want their cars. She wanted a door that locked from the inside. She wanted to finish the work her mother had started before the darkness took her mind completely. She didn't know that across the city, in one of those very towers, a young girl named Min-Hee was throwing a textbook across a marble floor, crying because the numbers made no sense. And she certainly didn't know that the very flyer she was writing on, the one she had pulled from a secure shredding bin, contained a series of encrypted strings that the most powerful hackers in Korea had been trying to break for months. Indigo closed her eyes, her stomach growling in the dark. She was a ghost in a machine, a shadow in the rain. But the code of the city was about to change, and for the first time in 11 years, the shadow child was about to become the most important variable in the Syndicate's equation. While Indigo was counting coins in the neon-soaked shadows, 30 floors above the city, the world was silent, cold, and made of glass. This was the fortress of Min-Hee, the only daughter of Director Han. To anyone looking in from the outside, she was the luckiest girl in Seoul. Her room was the size of a luxury apartment, filled with high-end gadgets and clothes that still had the scent of Parisian boutiques. But to Min-Hee, the room felt like a high-tech cage. She sat at a desk made of solid obsidian, staring at a holographic display that flickered with advanced calculus. Her private tutor, a man with a sharp suit and an even sharper voice, stood over her. Again, Min-Hee, if you cannot master the logic of the derivative, you will never be fit to sit in your father's chair. Do you wish to be the reason the Han legacy fails? Min-Hee's hands trembled. The numbers on the screen didn't look like math to her, they looked like jagged glass. Every time she tried to focus, the pressure of her father's shadow, the Iron Lotus himself, made her mind go blank. She wasn't slow, but her brain processed the world through patterns and stories, not the rigid, cold logic her father demanded. I don't understand the third step, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the building's climate control. The tutor sighed, a sound of pure disappointment. We are done for tonight. I will report your lack of progress to the director. Pray he is in a merciful mood. When the heavy doors clicked shut, Min-Hee didn't cry. She was beyond tears. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Far below, the city looked like a circuit board. She watched the tiny lights of the cars and wondered if anyone down there was actually happy. She knew her father loved her in his own way, but his love was a transaction. It was based on performance, strength, and the ability to survive in a world of sharks. Director Han didn't have room for a daughter who didn't get it. Restless and suffocated, Min-Hee grabbed her tablet and slipped past the sleeping guards toward the one place she felt she could breathe, the rooftop garden. It was a restricted zone, a lush forest of imported trees and quiet streams built into the top of the skyscraper. She sat on a stone bench near a thick thicket of bamboo, opening a digital workbook. She tried one more time to solve the equation, but the variables mocked her. She let out a frustrated sob and dropped the tablet onto the grass. The denominator is wrong, a small, steady voice said from the shadows of the bamboo. Min-Hee froze. She looked around, her heart racing. Emerging from the darkness was a girl who looked like she belonged to a different planet. She was barefoot, wearing a stained brown dress, her hair a wild crown of curls. But it was her eyes that caught Min-Hee. They weren't filled with fear or awe. They were filled with the answer. Indigo stepped closer, pointing at the glowing screen on the grass. You're treating the limit as a constant. If you shift the perspective to the curve, the answer isn't a number, it's a movement. Min-Hee stared at the homeless girl, then back at the tablet. For the first time in her life, the jagged glass of the numbers began to smooth out into a clear path. Min-Hee stared, motionless. In her world, people were defined by their uniforms, the sharp suits of the guards, the starched collars of her tutors, the cold silk of her father's robes. But the girl standing before her wore the city itself, dust from the subways, the scent of rain, and a gaze that didn't blink in the face of wealth. How did you get up here? Min-Hee whispered, her eyes darting toward the security cameras hidden in the stone lanterns. The ventilation shaft on the 28th floor has a loose grate, Indigo replied, her voice as calm as a winter morning. And your sensors are programmed to ignore anything under 30 kilograms. They think I'm a stray cat. Indigo knelt on the grass, picking up the discarded tablet. She didn't look at it with the reverence of someone seeing a luxury item. She looked at it as a tool. With a few swift swipes of her dirt-stained fingers, she cleared the tutor's cluttered notes. They teach you to fear the math, Indigo said, looking up at the heiress. They want you to see a wall, but my mother taught me that numbers are just another language, and right now you're stuttering. For the next hour, the rooftop garden transformed. The artificial stream became a visual representation of fluid dynamics, the bamboo stalks became a lesson in geometry. Under the moonlight, the homeless girl broke down the barriers that had paralyzed Min-Hee for years. For the first time, Min-Hee didn't feel like a disappointment. She felt like a student. You're amazing, Min-Hee breathed, watching Indigo solve a multi-step equation using a stick in a patch of soft soil. Why aren't you in school? Indigo's hand paused. The shadow of her mother, lost in the neon rain below, flickered in her eyes. Because in this city, you need a name to enter the light, and I don't exist on any map. She stood up, handing the tablet back. Same time tomorrow, don't tell the man in the black suit, he'll make the math go away. As Indigo vanished back into the shadows of the bamboo, Min-Hee looked down at her tablet. The equations were solved, but a new one had taken its place. She had found a friend, but she had also invited a ghost into the Syndicate's heart. Wait until you see what happens when a girl with nothing to lose starts rewriting the code of a man who owns everything. The rooftop became a world between worlds. Below them, the Syndicate moved like a silent machine, enforcing the will of Director Han across the city. Above them, the stars were hidden by the smog of Seoul. But in that small patch of green, two girls were rewriting the laws of their lives. For 2 weeks, Indigo returned every night. She became a shadow that Min-Hee looked for with more desperation than she had ever felt for her father's approval. Indigo didn't just teach math, she taught Min-Hee how to see the shadowed tailies hidden in plain sight. She showed her how the city's power grid pulsed with a rhythm and how the Syndicate's own logistical flyers, the ones Indigo used for scrap paper, held patterns that no one else bothered to read. Why do you use these? Min-Hee asked one night, pointing to a crumpled high-security memo Indigo was using to plot a graph. Because they're everywhere in the bins near your father's office, Indigo said, her eyes focused on the numbers. They're thick paper, good for writing, but the strings of numbers on the bottom, they're beautiful, they're like music. Min-Hee didn't realize that those strings were actually the encrypted routing codes for the Iron Lotus's black market accounts. To Indigo, they were just complex variables to be solved for fun. Their bond grew in the silence. Min-Hee brought Indigo real food, warm juk, fresh fruit and steamed dumplings that Indigo would sometimes hide in her bag to take back to her mother. In return, Indigo gave Min-Hee the one thing money couldn't buy, the confidence to stand tall. But a sanctuary built on a skyscraper is still a target. On the 14th night, the air felt different. The usual hum of the building's cooling system had spiked, and the security lights on the perimeter didn't flicker their usual green. Indigo felt it first, the vibration of the hunt. You need to go, Indigo whispered, standing up and clutching her bag. What, we haven't finished the theorem, Min-Hee protested. The air is too heavy, Indigo said, her street-honed instincts screaming. Someone is. Before she could finish, the heavy reinforced glass doors of the penthouse slid open with a hiss that sounded like a blade. A dozen men in tactical gear, led by a man whose silhouette was as sharp as the obsidian desk he sat behind, stepped into the moonlight. Director Han had arrived, and he wasn't alone. Most people watch these stories for the drama, but they stay for the moment the predator realizes he's met his match. Get ready, because the Iron Lotus is about to find out that his most secure codes have been a child's playground. The garden, once a sanctuary of soft moonlight and whispered math, was suddenly flooded by the harsh, clinical white of tactical flashlights. Min-Hee gasped, dropping her tablet as the heavy boots of the Syndicate's elite security force crunched over the manicured grass. At the center of the formation stood Director Han. He didn't look like a father, he looked like an executioner in a three-piece suit. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over the scene, the expensive school materials scattered on the ground, and the ragged, barefoot girl standing in the middle of his private empire. Move away from her, Min-Hee, Han commanded, his voice a low, dangerous vibration. No, father, she's my friend, she's the one helping me, Min-Hee cried, stepping in front of Indigo. Han's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. He looked at the shadow child. To him, Indigo wasn't a person, she was a lapse in security, a bug in the system that needed to be deleted. A street urchin is your tutor, do you take me for a fool? He gestured to his head of security, a scarred man who moved toward Indigo with a pair of plastic zip ties. Indigo's heart hammered against her ribs, but her mind, the mind of a mathematician, was already calculating the exits. She saw the distance to the ledge, the angle of the guards, and the grip the man was about to use. Wait, Indigo's voice rang out, surprisingly steady for an 11-year-old facing the underworld. If you touch me, your 4:00 a.m. shipment from the Incheon docks will be flagged by the maritime authorities. The guards froze. Director Han's eyes narrowed until they were mere slits. That shipment was a ghost, a secret known only to him and 3 high-ranking members of the Syndicate. What did you just say? Han whispered. The routing code, Indigo said, pointing to the crumpled flyer she had been using for scrap paper. The sequence was prime-heavy. It was easy to solve. You've been using a shifting cipher based on the 2014 Seoul Stock Exchange fluctuations. It's elegant, but it's predictable. The garden fell into a silence, so heavy it felt like the building itself was holding its breath. Director Han stepped forward, his cold mask finally cracking with a spark of terrifying curiosity. Search her bag, he ordered, now. Watch closely, because the moment that bag opens, the gutter girl stops being a victim and starts being the Syndicate's most valuable asset. The head of security snatched Indigo's tattered bag, dumping its contents onto the pristine white marble of the rooftop patio. Out tumbled a few half-eaten dumplings, a broken pencil, a photo of her mother in better days, and dozens of scraps of paper. Director Han knelt, his silk suit trousers brushing the dirt Indigo had brought with her from the streets. He picked up a piece of a discarded Syndicate memo. On the front was a high-level logistical order. On the back, in Indigo's cramped, precise handwriting, was a series of mathematical proofs that appeared to be gibberish to the untrained eye. But Han's eyes were trained. The predator has found his prize, but can you ever truly tame a girl who has learned to survive in the dark? Stay tuned, because the price of a home is about to be paid in secrets. The penthouse was a cathedral of glass and cold ambition. Indigo sat on a chair that cost more than her mother had earned in a decade, her bare feet tucked under her stained dress. Across from her, Director Han sat behind his obsidian desk, the scraps of her scratchpad, spread out like a ritual sacrifice. You have a gift, Indigo, Han said, his voice stripped of its earlier roar. But a gift like yours in the streets is like a diamond in a gutter. Eventually someone will step on it, or someone will steal it. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. I am offering you a choice. I can have my men find your mother. I can place her in the finest medical facility in the country. I can give you a name, a school, and a life where you never have to count coins for bread again. Indigo's heart skipped. It was everything she had prayed for under the broken kiosks of Mile 12. But she knew the Syndicate. She knew the shadowed tailies of men like Han. And the price, she whispered. Han tapped the ledger of blood, the decrypted files she had unknowingly mastered. You become my eyes, you look at the data my analysts miss. You find the holes in my rival's armor before they find mine. You belong to the Iron Lotus. Indigo looked at the window. Somewhere down there in the neon rain, her mother was talking to ghosts. If she refused, they went back to the gutter. If she accepted, she was selling her soul to a man who ruled through fear. I want my mother to be safe first, Indigo said, her voice hardening. I want to see her in a bed with clean sheets. I want a doctor to tell me she's okay. Han smiled, a thin, sharp line. Agreed, but remember, Indigo, in this world, once you step into the light of the Syndicate, your shadow belongs to me. He pressed a button on his desk. Prepare the medical transport, and get this girl a uniform. She starts at Queen's Crest tomorrow morning. As he flipped through the scraps, his breathing slowed. He wasn't looking at math homework. He was looking at the manual decryption of the Iron Lotus's Black Ledger, a multi-layered encryption system that had cost him millions of dollars and 4 years to develop. Indigo hadn't just solved the math, she had found the ghost keys in the code that allowed her to predict the Syndicate's every move. Who gave you these codes? Han asked, his voice no longer loud but terrifyingly quiet. No one, Indigo whispered, her chin trembling but her eyes locked on his. I found the papers in the bin. They had patterns. I like patterns. Han looked from the scraps of paper to the small, fragile girl standing before him. He realized that if these papers had fallen into the hands of the Seoul police or a rival gang, his life would be over by sunrise. But more importantly, he realized that he was looking at a biological supercomputer. "You did this for fun?" Han asked. "I did it to forget I was hungry," Indigo replied. Director Han stood up, the scraps of paper clutched tightly in his hand. He looked at his security team who were waiting for the signal to take her away. Then he looked at his daughter Min-Hee, who was shielding Indigo with her own body. "Clear the roof," Han commanded. "Sir," the head of security stammered. "I said clear the roof," Han roared. "And bring the car around, we aren't going to the precinct, we're going to the penthouse." The discovery was complete. The girl from the shadows had just walked through the front door of the most powerful house in Korea, not as a prisoner, but as the only person alive who could truly see the Syndicate's soul. The predator has found his prize, but can you ever truly tame a girl who has learned to survive in the dark? Stay tuned, because the price of a home is about to be paid in secrets. The penthouse was a cathedral of glass and cold ambition. Indigo sat on a chair that cost more than her mother had earned in a decade, her bare feet tucked under her stained dress. Across from her, Director Han sat behind his obsidian desk, the scraps of her scratchpad spread out like a ritual sacrifice. "You have a gift, Indigo," Han said, his voice stripped of its earlier roar. "But a gift like yours in the streets is like a diamond in a gutter. Eventually someone will step on it, or someone will steal it." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "I am offering you a choice. I can have my men find your mother. I can place her in the finest medical facility in the country. I can give you a name, a school, and a life where you never have to count coins for bread again." Indigo's heart skipped. It was everything she had prayed for under the broken kiosks of Mile 12. But she knew the Syndicate. She knew the shadowed tailies of men like Han. "And the price," she whispered. Han tapped the ledger of blood, the decrypted files she had unknowingly mastered. "You become my eyes, you look at the data my analysts miss. You find the holes in my rival's armor before they find mine. You belong to the Iron Lotus." Indigo looked at the window. Somewhere down there in the neon rain, her mother was talking to ghosts. If she refused, they went back to the gutter. If she accepted, she was selling her soul to a man who ruled through fear. "I want my mother to be safe first," Indigo said, her voice hardening. "I want to see her in a bed with clean sheets. I want a doctor to tell me she's okay." Han smiled, a thin, sharp line. "Agreed. But remember, Indigo, in this world, once you step into the light of the Syndicate, your shadow belongs to me." He pressed a button on his desk. "Prepare the medical transport, and get this girl a uniform. She starts at Queen's Crest tomorrow morning." The shadow child is about to see her mother's ghosts finally laid to rest, but at what cost to her own freedom? The transition was so fast it felt like a fever dream. Within hours, Indigo was no longer a ghost in a PC bang. She sat in the back of a silent, leather-scented SUV, watching through tinted glass as a high-end medical team arrived at the alleyway where she had spent her childhood. She watched as her mother, still mumbling about the data in the wind, was gently lifted onto a stretcher. For the first time there were no insults from market women. No one poured water on her feet. Instead, a doctor in a crisp white coat spoke to her with the respect usually reserved for a CEO's wife. "She is safe now, Indigo," Director Han said from the seat beside her, his eyes never leaving his tablet. "She is being taken to a private wing at Seoul National. She will have the best neurological care in Asia. Her ghosts will be managed." Indigo didn't say thank you. She knew this was a debt. Instead, she looked at her own hands. They had been scrubbed clean. Her nails were trimmed. She was wearing a silk dress that felt like air against her skin. Later that night, Han led her to a room adjacent to Min-Hee's. It was filled with books, a high-speed workstation, and a window that overlooked the very streets she had just escaped. "Tomorrow you enter Queen's Crest Academy as my ward," Han stated. "You will be Min-Hee's protector in the classroom, and you will be my mind in the shadows. Do not make me regret my mercy." As he left, Min-Hee slipped into the room, her eyes red from crying. She didn't say a word, she just hugged Indigo. The sad heiress and the shadow child were no longer tutoring in a garden, they were sisters in a gilded cage. The gates of Queen's Crest Academy opened like the jaws of a lion. The same security guards who had once chased Indigo away now bowed as she stepped out of the director's SUV. She wore the sharp navy blazer of the school, her hair neatly braided, her backpack no longer tattered but filled with the latest tech. As she walked through the halls with Min-Hee, the whispers followed them like a trail of smoke. "Who is she? The director's new ward. Look at her eyes, she looks like she's seen the end of the world." In the first class of the day, advanced mathematics, the teacher posed a question that had stumped the seniors for weeks. Indigo didn't wait to be called on. She walked to the board, picked up the chalk, and began to write. She didn't just solve the problem, she optimized it. She used the same syndicate logic she had used to survive the streets. When she finished, the room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. The teacher didn't even speak, he simply stepped back in awe. That evening, Indigo sat in her new room and opened the tablet Director Han had given her. A message was waiting. It wasn't a school assignment. It was a file from the Syndicate, a series of irregularities in the Tokyo accounts. Indigo looked at the numbers. She looked at the photo of her mother, now resting in a clean hospital bed on her nightstand. Then she began to work. The girl the world called the daughter of a mad woman was gone. In her place stood the Syndicate's secret daughter, no longer a victim of the shadows but the one who controlled them. The future had finally opened its doors, and Indigo didn't just walk through them, she rewrote the code for everyone else.